At the beginning of 2026, French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu announced a decision to freeze the country's most controversial pension reform, raising the retirement age from 62 to 64.
France's most controversial pension reform raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. The change is being phased in gradually, with the full age of 64 applying to those retiring in 2028.
Until 2028. This was the government's final move to avoid collapse. But in those same weeks, France's independent audit body was reporting something different. The deficit in the pension system will more than double in the coming decades, adding nearly €500 billion to the national debt. On one side, politicians are delaying the problem, while on the other, the numbers are worsening rapidly. This isn't just a budget dispute, it's a war that hasn't left the streets of France since 2023. In this video, we will uncover the real mechanism behind this, why every attempt at reform ends in an explosion, and why solving this crisis becomes harder with each passing year. Let's first look at the big picture, because this is not the story of a single reform. According to estimates by the French Court of Auditors, Cour des Comptes, the annual deficit in the country's pension system is estimated to be between €6 billion and €45 billion. And this uncertainty itself is already a warning. The court has warned that between 2035 and 2045, this deficit will more than double and will add an additional burden of approximately €500 billion to the national debt in the coming decades. The French Pension Advisory Council (COR) goes even further. According to its latest report, the gap between contributions and payments could reach 2.4% of GDP by 2070. The reason is simple. The birth rate has fallen from 1.8 to 1.45 per woman. Meanwhile, pension expenditures are already massive in themselves. Last year, France spent €422 billion on pensions. This is equal to 14.1% of GDP and is the second highest figure in the developed world after Italy. All of this is happening at a time when France has already seen its fifth prime minister in less than 2 years. Economic growth is expected to fall from 0.9% in 2025 to 0.7% in 2026, and the OECD has issued a direct warning. Without cutting spending and restoring pension reform, France is drifting toward uncontrollable debt growth. The first reason, and the cause underlying all other problems, is demographics. France's pension system is built on the pay-as-you-go principle. Those who work pay money today, and this money goes to today's retirees. For the system to work, there must be enough workers to finance enough retirees.
Workers contribute to the pension fund. Retirees withdraw their benefits. When contributions fall, the balance tilts. The fund weakens.
For decades, this balance could be maintained because France was one of the European countries with a relatively high birth rate. But this regulator is no longer working. The birth rate per woman has fallen from 1.8 to 1.45, which is well below the replacement level 2.1. An economist from the COR explains this with simple logic. If the birth rate falls, it means there will be fewer people in the workforce tomorrow. If there are fewer workers tomorrow, it means there will be fewer contributors. The result is measurable. According to COR's forecast, increasing immigration can provide short-term relief, but it does not solve the problem. It just delays it by about a decade, because immigrants also eventually retire. There is an important nuance here. This is not just a story of people having fewer children. This is a concrete, numerically proven example of how the demographic clock works, carrying the same structural risk for the whole of Europe.
The pension system deficit is projected to rise steadily. By 2070, it is forecast to reach 2.4% of GDP. This highlights the need for long-term planning.
The second reason is political paralysis. But let us look closely, for this goes far deeper than the simple explanation that politicians lack resolve. In 2023, President Emmanuel Macron forced through a reform raising the retirement age from 62 to 64, doing so without a parliamentary vote by invoking special constitutional powers. The result was weeks of strikes and street protests, with millions marching across France. This move severely damaged Macron's political capital. Now, The pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction.
In 2023, pension reform legislation was adopted. Its implementation was frozen in 2026. A general election will occur in 2027. The reform is scheduled for review in 2028.
To maintain governmental stability, Prime Minister Lecornu has frozen the reform until 2028 in an effort to secure the support of socialist lawmakers. Yet, this does not solve the problem. It merely pushes the political burden beyond the 2027 presidential election. The cost of this is already becoming apparent. The Cour's alternative proposals, raising contributions or cutting benefits while keeping the retirement age unchanged, are considered less desirable, as they could directly undermine household purchasing power and damage the French economy. The resulting situation is this: every presidential candidate will now be compelled to present a clear plan to voters in 2027, whether to restore, expand, or completely abolish the reform. In other words, the problem has not been resolved. It has simply been deferred to the next election. And here is the third reason. The one auditors emphasize the most, yet the one that receives the least attention in media, headlines the structural budget trap. The OECD has issued a direct warning: without cutting expenditures and restarting pension reforms, France will drift toward uncontrollable debt growth. The French economy grew by 0.9% in 2025, but it is expected to slow to 0.7% in 2026, due to persistent political uncertainty, high interest rates, and external shocks. This creates a vicious cycle. High interest rates increase the government's borrowing costs, political instability delays reforms, and delayed reforms widen the pension deficit, which, in turn, further increases the debt. Auditors state it clearly, linking the retirement age to life expectancy, meaning that as people live longer, the retirement age rises automatically, is the only step that can resolve the deficit without damaging economic growth. However, this is a politically explosive proposal, because it is the very same reform that set the streets on fire in 2023, only in a more severe form. This shows why these three reasons reinforce one another. Demographics could have been managed on their own. Political delay could have been managed on its own. Budgetary pressure could have been managed on its own. But when they come together, it is not just a test for a government, but for an entire social contract.
La jeunesse paie pour la vieillesse.
Et nous, c'est une injustice. Réforme des retraites, injustice.
But this is the most remarkable part. The burden of this crisis is not distributed equally. Last year, France spent 14.1% of its GDP on pensions, a share higher than what the country spends on education and defense combined. Meanwhile, the outlook for young workers is completely different. They are paying into the system today, but the Cour's own reports show that how the system will be funded by the time they reach retirement age in 2070 remains an open question. The point to note is this: the Cour alternatively suggests increasing contributions, reducing payouts, and raising the retirement age, but each of these hits a different generation in a different way. Raising the retirement age forces young workers to work longer. Reducing payouts hurts today's pensioners. Increasing contributions takes a larger share of current workers' wages. The resulting picture is simple: every solution turns someone into a loser, and that is precisely why no politician dares to take a full step. The 2023 reform itself is proof of this. The government had to pass it without a parliamentary vote, because no coalition was willing to openly support it. This is not an accidental deadlock. It is an indicator that France's 80-year-old social contract, the young support the old, and you wait your turn model, no longer works mathematically. This is not a comfortable fact to contemplate, but the numbers show it. Thus, France's pension crisis cannot be explained in a single sentence. It is the intersection of three forces: demographic collapse, political paralysis, and self-reinforcing budgetary pressure, all occurring as France drifts toward the 2027 elections. This does not mean the collapse of France. It is a social contract that has lasted for decades, reaching its demographic and financial limits. A painful, uneven transition with an uncertain outcome. For a 30-year-old worker today who is paying into the system, The statistic that the country's economy is growing offers little comfort if their own pension future is uncertain. The question is, will this become the new normal for Europe, or will the 2027 elections be a decisive turning point? We will explore this in the next video by comparing it with the similar demographic challenges faced by Italy and Germany. If this analysis was useful, please subscribe, because the European economy is changing rapidly, and we track every figure back to its source.